snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so I am here today to do a book review, and the book that I'm going to be reviewing is Memories of Ice, which is the third book in the Malazan series by Steven Erikson. This series is epic. It is epic on every sense of the word. It is a huge series. There are massive amounts of fantastical elements that are brought in. Basically any fantastical creature that you can think of might well appear at some point in this story, but it has its own quality to it. It's very individual, it's very unique. And the whole idea of the Malazan Empire trying to conquer everything is the basis, but each of the books focuses on different characters within that and different sections of the land and what is going on. Book number 3 actually goes back to some of the characters from book number 1, which I really enjoyed because Gardens of the Moon I felt was really, really good and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, whereas Dead House Gates I gave like 3.5. This book was definitely back up there and I really enjoyed it, and I think that is largely due to the characters and the way that Erikson really pulled all of the writing style and the general plot together in this one and made it really interesting. So let's get into why I really like this. I would give this book a 4.5 star rating. Not quite 5 stars because it didn't completely blow my mind, but there were really cool elements within it and I did enjoy this a lot better than Gardens of the Moon and Dead House Gates, which are the first and second. I felt like within Gardens of the Moon the characters were really, really well developed and I really enjoyed seeing them in emotional moments or tragic moments, whereas in Dead House Gates, although the characters are still developed, they weren't anywhere near as developed on the same level as Gardens of the Moon, and I didn't feel like I connected as much with them, so that was a little bit disappointing for me. Equally, the Gardens of the Moon pacing I really enjoyed because it was a lot quicker, whereas Dead House Gates was slow and dense and hard to get through at points, and there was a lot of battle scenes within Dead House Gates that I just didn't really enjoy. That definitely slowed it down for me. This book, I believe, has a blend of both things. It has good pacing, which is really entertaining. It has great characters who are very well developed, and their storylines are just very intense and exciting, and a lot is always going on within these books. There's always a lot of kind of undertones and subliminal messaging and things like that. But I really enjoyed this one and I felt like this was by far the best one in the series up until now. Okay, this book follows 2 major storylines which gradually entwine together as the story goes on. The first storyline is a group of ex-Malazan soldiers who are being led by Dujek One-Arm, and they have a mission to go to war with the Panyan Seer. A rather daunting task because the Panyan Seer is someone not many people know too much about, and he's very, very powerful, and it requires a large amount of allies to kind of band together from various different walks of life that no one really knew would all come together. In this book we see a lot of different races. We see some who are undead, we see some who are fantastical, and we see humans, and we see different people from around the world and the Empire who are all joining together steadily to go and defeat the Panyan Seer. The second storyline follows the crippled god, and this is a more subtle storyline. It comes into play definitely, but it's definitely not the main focus of the story. I have a feeling it might be setting up for book number 4. The crippled god is a god who is coming back into play. This story deals with not only mortals but also gods and their involvement in the mortal world and how they manipulate things. So having a god come back into play is pretty interesting. His participation in the game and manipulating everything is going to affect everyone. The story itself follows quite a few different characters once again. A lot of them are returning characters from Gardens of the Moon, but we do meet a few new characters as well who are very interesting. I really like the fact that we had the returning characters because I felt like I'd already connected to them in Gardens of the Moon, so I already knew them, and by this point of reading you definitely have all of the terminology down, because there is a lot of new terminology and different races and things like that that you have to get your head around, and even the character names themselves you have to get your head around them because there's a lot of them. So there's a lot to remember with this series, but by reading book number 3 I feel like I was at the point where I was getting my head around everything. I understood who was what and what was who and all that sort of stuff, so I really enjoyed this book a lot more. Whiskey Jack and Paran are 2 main characters who we have seen before, and I enjoyed both of their storylines immensely. They're both enjoyable and interesting characters to read about, and I definitely feel like each of them has their own distinct personalities, and they're really, really thrown into some dark and scary situations within this book that they have to deal with, and there's a lot on their plate to deal with, a lot of responsibility for them to take on. We got to see a little bit more of each of them And we also got to see a little bit more of each of their kind of softer sides, their more sentimental sides, where they're being pushed and we don't know how they're going to react because we haven't seen them be that way before. We also saw them having to endure a more large-scale battle. Up until this point, neither of them has engaged in a massive scale battle, whereas they definitely do in this book, and they're in charge of a large amount of people, which is quite a daunting task. We also get to see Tok, Tool and Lady Envy within this book. I really enjoyed them. They had their own sort of mini storyline, which I enjoyed a lot, and the character dynamics between the three of them was great. There was a lot of kind of back and forth bickering or questioning or just having sarcastic and entertaining conversations about various different things, which I thought was highly engaging and definitely a really humorous part of the book. I very much enjoyed their dynamic as a group. We see them journeying through different warrens and different lands. Their camaraderie and humour was really uplifting, and it definitely brought the story up a level, because otherwise it would be a really dark and scary story, whereas the humour and the kind of friendliness between those characters really uplifted it. And I feel like because I already knew a little bit about Tok and Tool, they were wonderful to return to, and those two as a duo was fantastic. They just bounced off of one another and they were entertaining, and I really loved it. Plus their stories take a huge amount of crazy turns and twists, which I just was not expecting. They end up in some really sinister, very scary situations and very brutal situations. Some moments are really heartwarming, but a lot of them are very sad and brutal, so yeah, their storyline was intense, let's put it that way. The other two characters who I really enjoy generally is Quickben. Quickben always seems to know a little bit more than he lets on. He's just very engaging to read about because his story is always taking crazy twists and we never quite know what he's going to reveal next. I really had some moments of joy where I was reading his parts and there was action and there was adventure going on, and he was really in control of a lot of what happened. He is a mage. And then we also have Cropper as well, who is my favourite character of the whole series by far. He's amazing. His storyline is like crazy, it's all over the place and he just gets in everyone's way and screws up everyone's plans, and it's just hilarious. But he has such an aura, a personality around him that is uplifting, it's enlightening, it's fun. He's very mysterious. He also seems to know a lot more than he gives away, but he is just really endearing as a character, very easy to connect to, very charming, and so many moments of humour. There was a moment within this book where he was like, Cropper dances like an unbroken egg frying on a skillet, and it just made me laugh so much. I really love his personality and character, and he's just highly amusing to read about. He really lifts up the tone of the book and makes it so entertaining. And yeah, there's some great lines that he comes out with. He also speaks about himself in third person, which is, I just think, hilarious and adds to the kind of craziness and kind of insane aura around him, which is just highly entertaining to read about. Some of the newer characters who we meet are SILVERFOX, who is a really young girl with an extraordinary amount of sway and power over the way that everything is going to work out in this big large-scale battle. She was a great addition to the book. I really enjoyed her personality, and even though she did kind of annoy me at some points, I understood why she was doing what she did, and I felt like she was really interesting to read about. I hope that she will definitely be someone we see a lot more of as the series progresses, because she has a lot of potential and there's a lot that I really like about her character and the way that she is, and she is put in some really trying and terrible situations. GRUNTLE, who was a lowly caravan guard at the beginning of the story, but definitely grows into a much larger role. He was certainly a wonderful addition to the book, and there were some moments where he was having conversations with other characters that I really enjoyed reading about. He's kind of the reluctant leader who takes on the role without really wanting to, but actually is very good at leading, and I really enjoyed seeing him develop himself and get into his character's role. Also, the fact that he was a caravan guard and quite a lowly person just means that he's very grounded and he's very down to earth, which I like seeing a lot. ITKOVIAN was another character who we meet, and I didn't really notice his character to begin with. I didn't really pay too much attention to his story, but then let's just say stuff happens. Lots of stuff happens with his story, and instantly he became one of my favourite characters, and I was like, oh my goodness, this storyline is insane. It is insane. So ITKOVIAN, definitely watch out for him, because I didn't take much notice, but then boom, stuff happens. There was so much in his story that was heartbreaking, heart-wrenching, sad and pure, and just, oh, it was emotional. His storyline was emotional for sure, and there were moments where I really, really sympathised and felt for him. Up until this point in the series, we have seen mortals and we've seen various different races of undead and kind of fantastical things. We've also seen gods. We've kind of seen them manipulating the mortals and using them for their own aims. But in this book we get introduced to some major elder gods, and elder gods can essentially play with mortals and with gods. So it adds a whole new layer to the complexity of the game and means that not only are we now being manipulated by gods, but the gods themselves might be being manipulated by elder gods. So there's a lot going on, and we have to try and sort of wade through all of the craziness that's going on, and it's really exciting to have the elder gods as well, because it means that there is even more complexity and even more craziness that is going on, and so many different weavings coming together. But my goodness, it could be confusing if it was any other writer. Steven Erikson does an excellent job of untangling things and being very foreboding, so that when things do happen you're like, oh my god, why didn't I see that was coming? Elder gods are badass, they're pretty badass, they bring a whole new dynamic. Generally, yeah, it just really enhances the read because there's a lot more going on than the first book, where there's still tons going on in the first book, but by this book, yeah, it's crazy. So I don't know how book 10 is going to be, but I imagine it's going to be insane. One of the things that we actually found out a lot more about within this book is certain races, and those include the Jaghearts, the Barghast, the Talan Imas, and the Tista Andi. All of these characters and races we find out a lot more about. We didn't really know too much about them other than their appearance, but in this one we meet various characters who are actually of these races, and we learn a lot more about the history and the way that their races are interwoven, and the way that their history connects, and why there are feuds between certain characters and races, and why there are alliances between certain races. So I really enjoyed learning the history and the background of those, because that was something I was certainly wondering about, and I felt like it was really, really well done and very well explained. We also meet the K'chain Chimal, who are some very terrifying, horrendous, dinosaur-like creatures with blades on their hands, like horrific. Imagine a T-Rex with blades on the hands, like big, massive machete blades. That is kind of what I imagine them to be. And my god, they are scary, scary, scary things. Also, we meet the Segulah. The Segulah are a race who are very much about fighting and very much about order by fighting. So if you are the best fighter, you will be the top ranking person. So neither of these races are people you would particularly want to meet, because they are badass fighters and pretty horrific. This book is a particularly bloody one. There are some moments which are so brutal. There's torture, there's all sorts of horrendous stuff that goes on to our main characters, and we feel so bad for them because they are just stuck in this horrible, horrible world. But of course it is all entertaining to read about, and it grips you, it draws you into the book, it makes you want to keep reading and find out what is going on and how they've got into this horrible situation. I think it is the most heartbreaking of the books so far. We've really connected with the characters by this point, so when their storylines do turn for the worse, it's just so sad to see them and see how they have to deal with these things that we just were not expecting, because it's all mind-blowing. Yeah, it's just a crazy, crazy series. Finally, even though I have been raving about this for ages, why am I only giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars? Because there was one storyline that I didn't love as much. There is a character who's called the Maibi, and her storyline I felt like, oh, it just grated on me. It started off fine, but gradually I felt like her storyline got more and more irritating, and I didn't enjoy reading about her perspective at all, because she just had sort of personality flips where one moment she seemed to be really nice and the next moment she was just complaining and irritating. So I didn't really like her personality or storyline, and even though it's an essential part of the story and I found the ending of her story very, very interesting, I just didn't enjoy reading about her. So I could only give this a 4.5 for that reason, but otherwise it was a really, really well written book, highly engaging, very entertaining, by far the best one in the series so far. I would love to hear what you guys have to say about this. I'm sure there are tons of characters who I've forgotten that you guys can tell me who is your favourite Malazan character and why. Please don't leave any spoilers though, because I've not read the rest in the series. But I would love to hear what you guys have to say about the series up to this point. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all very, very soon in another video. Bye! Me and you gonna have a little chat about the